Okay. Video's rolling, but what do you got? Yes. Morning. I'd like to call the Executive Committee meeting September 25th to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Tripp?
Present.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Legess? Mr. Vickery? Mr. Olchoff?
Mr. President.
Mr. Hess? Mr. Hess? Mr. Snipes? Mr. Byrne? Mr. Seroy?
Present.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Zenz? Mr. Lear? Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Full house. All right. Have no public comment today or presentations. We do not have the minutes of the previous meeting together with a frown face circled on the sheet here. She's unhappy about that. Under legislative, Mr. Lear, do you have any updates?
Mr. Chairman, the one thing I would mention is UCCI has been putting out some information in regard to small cell technology. There's some differences between some newly passed state legislation and an FCC draft order. The Highway Department is the one that's most affected, and that they're on top of it, so I think we'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. I did have a short update. I believe it was last week. It seems like a while ago. I was in DC. They're on dual business, both for working with county business, talking with people high up in the administration regarding a couple different issues. No taxpayer money expended, by the way. I just want to mention that. This was nothing on the county's dime, right up front. I also combined it with my other job. I had a trade show in Baltimore that I spent some time at as well, so I was able to do this. I met with representatives from the from Tammy Duckworth's office, Senator Duckworth, and a couple senators from Indiana. Was unable to get to a lot of the folks in the House because the hurricane was bearing down. A lot of people took off, so they went into session that day. Also had the opportunity to talk with, and most of those conversations, actually all of those conversations were about the river, because we're building this coalition with Indiana, and we need to make sure that on the federal level, that everybody's aware of what our intent is and how we have this thing going that is really historic, how we're all working together to try to fix a 100-year-old problem so it doesn't last another 100 years. So it's going to take some time, but we want to make sure we're on the same page, so when we do things like ask for one Army Corps of Engineers office, those are the people that can help facilitate that discussion, because right now there's three. So there's three different plans, three different people to approve. You know, it's kind of a mess to get anything through to talk about the whole river system in general. The other side of it is when we go to what really matters at that point is once there's an engineering plan, which they're working on, is, well, how do we pay for it? And there's bi-state money that's available where single state money is not available. So you have things from FEMA. Millions of dollars are hanging out there right now that we're going to start going after for these types of projects. So that was the main goal of getting to those higher level, the senators and the Congress people on that subject, to make sure they're aware. And then locally, we're going to work together to build that, further strengthen that consensus on a plan forward. This is a 20, 30-year project, but if you don't start now, then our kids will be starting the project, or our kids' kids. So that was the main goal. The next day was talking to it's Undersecretary of Agriculture, those types of people. Dr. Carson came in and spoke a little bit about HUD, you know, different things about the area. The Vice President showed up for a little bit, talked to us about some different angles. That was a little bit more rah-rah than it was nuts and bolts, but the rest of the visit was more nuts and bolts about what's going on and who we can access for some of these things that we're talking about. So I brought up CSL in the room with all of the other state reps that were there, people from our governor's office, county board chairman. I got my money's worth, so to speak, as far as asking the questions, because this whole CSL expansion, this is the largest in the world as far as pharmaceutical goes. And if our state does realize that it's a big deal, it's the largest development in the state, but it's also the largest pharmaceutical in the world, and we are competing with other places around the world. So if we don't step up as a state, we are as a county, but as a state and as a nation, I would hate to see part of that go somewhere else. So that was the whole point of the trip. And again, no taxpayer money from this county was used in that endeavor. So any questions about that? If there's any follow-ups, I've tried to be as complete as possible, but not much downtime. And it was like 95 degrees walking around in a suit, and I'm insulated already. That part wasn't fun. Did get to go to the White House, though. That was kind of cool. Mr. Olthoff.
That was a benefit of being a member of the UCCI, right?
Benefit of being a member of UCCI. So exactly. And so it was about half of it was that, and half was the business trip. So I was able to draw that distinction, which meant that none of it had no meals or anything had to fall to the county. So, Mr. Seroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Getting to the river project, what was the feedback that you got from senators from the Indiana side about cooperating? Because their side's pretty much done, isn't it? Their side is dredged, and it's
not dredged.
It's not dredged.
No, they've been continually doing that, but it makes the problem worse.
The silt comes in to our side.
They dredge it and it just refills in, and so they're in this whole just cycle of bad money after bad money, and they finally realized that. And the senators they were aware but didn't see the presentation that we showed here. So I brought that in paper form and made them aware of it. So, and it was mainly their staff to bird dog that and to make sure. I didn't ask for anything at that point. I said the ask is going to come once we have something that we're able to overlay between the two states. Just make them aware.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
And so it wasn't a photo op either. It was more like, we're going to come back, but we're going to come back as two states, everybody working together. Maybe we all sit at the table together and do this publicly, so the public knows we're actually agreeing on this.
All right.
So,
thank you.
Yep. Unless there's nothing else, moving on. No appointments. Information services, Mr. Duval.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. Last month, I said that I was going to try to answer those board members that were somewhat concerned that they didn't have an avenue to have a copy of the county board calendar to their phones, the ones that are Android. I told you we'd implement something or look into that. We did that. We pushed it out last night. Those people who had that we could see that had a Gmail account, we sent that out. There's nothing you should have to do for the most part. If you do have an Android phone, it should push out to you and work immediately. If there's other people that have an Android phone and we just couldn't tell because you listed some other email account, just let us know and we'll do whatever it needs to do to get it to you. It's a simple process. Let us know. We make it on our end and it'll just start working for you. The other thing, just keeping it brief, is I noticed in a meeting that, I don't remember who it was, a few of the board members were somewhat, not confused, but they were not quite understanding how we were going to do or implement the computer upgrade over going forward. Wanted to know what our plan was. I've stated that in this committee, but again, maybe I'll restate that because I was probably not that clear. I want to make it understanding. What we began in this year was, and we talked about it last year, was I was converting our existing budget, a portion of our existing budget that was there for maintenance, to starting over a 2-year period to replenish, and this only deals with this building. Every other building, they use their own computer funds. We're working with our existing budget to replenish or upgrade those computers in place with refurbished computers that will be much faster than what we have, and it's newer hardware. It's not brand new hardware, but it's newer, it's superior to what we have, and we would have the newest version of operating systems. And through working with the chairman and the finance director, we found a way to upgrade the version of Office. All this by January 2020 has to be in place so we're in compliance to make sure that we have all possible security measures and security patches in to protect the people's data. That is out of our existing budget, and including 2019 budget. So I did not submit a dramatic request for a budget for 2019 because we had discussed it earlier that it'd be best to wait for when we do request additional funds for the money to actually have come in first. And even at that time, we're going to try to be frugal about it. Going forward after that, say 2020 going forward, I'll submit a budget that's to start replenishing a portion of all the computers in this building, basically 1/4 of all computers every year so we can spread it out. That should match up with the age of those refurbished computers that we put out, because we're putting out 2 to 3 year old computers, but they're perfectly good. By that time, they'll be 4 or 5 years old, and you just start doing the rotation, but that's an efficient use of our budgets. It's not requesting any additional funds right now. And that allows you to say that we'll upgrade 1/4 of the, and that's just one way that we may modify at that time, 1/4 of all the computers in here every year. It makes it a reasonable request. Given that there's not that many in this building, but it's significant enough, at that time you may just say, well, let's just do it all at once and then deal with it out of capital expenditures, say 1/4. That'll be up to you guys, or Chairman, how we do that. But I wanted to submit a plan. So we have something working from our existing budget, and we have a plan of how to proceed going forward. So we basically, the request I've heard from board members and the chairman is to get back to reinstating the program we originally had, which is to rotate the computers over so we're never in that issue again. So hopefully I explained that clearer than I've probably done in the past. And if you have any questions about that.
Anyone?
No,
Yep.
that's it.
We're good. All right. Thank you. Health Department, Mr. Beavis.
Good morning. I just had one topic that I wanted to bring up. It was just last week we had received some information from the Illinois Department of Public Health in relation to a Heartland virus case that was determined to be in a Kankakee residence. So Heartland virus is kind of something I wasn't on my radar earlier this year. It revolves around our Vector program. So the Vector program is a grant that we've gotten for a number of years where we mostly are collecting for mosquitoes and trying to determine for West Nile virus, but it also includes checking for ticks and some other vector-borne diseases with insects. So this Heartland, this particular case is kind of groundbreaking for Illinois in that it's the first Heartland case ever in Illinois. It's something that's been traditionally a few other Midwestern states and traditionally then more southern where it's a lot more warmer. But they feel, I think Indiana is another state that has had some positive Heartland virus cases. And because of, I think, our summer with the hot weather that we had this year, it was conducive to that. So they put out the press release. Basically, it's very rare. There are some instances where some patients have passed away. In this particular instance, I believe ours is going to be okay. There's no antibiotics or anything that you can do. It's basically just pushing fluids. The symptoms tend to be typically similar to a lot of other things, including foodborne illnesses. People will have fever, headaches, fatigue, muscle aches, and diarrhea. And typically, if you are bitten by a tick that has this and you get it, it's usually about 2 weeks after the bite. So individual is feeling pretty bad and they'll go to either their doctor or the hospital. If they do the testing for it and it's found positive, then that's how they find it. And so then just with the press release that we put out, It's just a basic reminder for people like we do with the mosquitoes to, this time of year when a lot of people are going to start going hunting and things like that, be out in the woods. Ticks tend to be on the tall grasses and the brush. They don't fly, they don't jump, but as you walk along in the woods or something, you brush up against something, they're going to rub off onto your clothing. So it's recommended you wear the light clothing so that you might be able to see that, and then check yourself for ticks or your children for ticks if they've been out playing outside. The state is scheduling with the Environmental Health Division of the Health Department to, I think Thursday of this week, to go out to the property of the individual. It's kind of out in the woods area, and they're going to do what's called a tick drag. Basically kind of take a sheet and you run it through an area of the property, try to see if you can collect some ticks on that, and then have those ticks tested to determine if they are the Lone Star tick, which is what spreads the disease. That comes out of the grant money that is part of the grant money that we have, so there's no additional cost there for us for that, and the state is going to be helping our staff coordinate that. So I might be able to update you in the future once we find out for sure if there was, but obviously the individual involved did not appear to have traveled recently, so that's why they're pretty confident that it was an in-county exposure, as opposed to somebody who had been traveling and then 2 weeks ago and then been exposed there and then was back home when they got sick. So it does seem to be here. So that was all I had, unless there's any questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Washington.
John, is there a way to identify the tick?
I'm sure there is. I don't have a picture of it now. So the tick in question is the Lone Star tick. So that could probably be Googled and then see. So like with Lyme disease, it's the deer tick, and that one's a really small one. So some ticks are different sizes in nature, and some might have different markings to be able to tell. So that's a good question, and I spent my time kind of looking up the signs, symptoms, and things like that this morning. I didn't consider looking at the picture of the tick itself.
Okay, thank you.
Is that good?
That's close.
Is that, I think we have a rendering.
That's more a spider, I think. So there,
No, I didn't. I was
no,
not.
actually,
Not
that's a
in
very
office.
good rendition.
Hey, Mike.
Any other questions? Mr. Zenz.
Real quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was this like evolved in some kind of way from what would normally be a tick bite, or what ticks normally have? Or, I mean, how did this particular strain of the Heartland come into that particular tick, if it's an in-county thing and not transported across, state lines or something along that? Is that like
I'm
some
not
type of evolution?
Well, there are a number of insects that carry certain diseases. In what little I was reading this morning, there are some like elk and deer and certain things that can carry this, that maybe that is, with the ticks on those animals, that's where they're getting it. Now, where the animals got it, I don't know if it's just an evolution of virus that is mutating as we go along, and then just here's this new one, or as they do better technology with testing, at laboratories, just discovering things that maybe have been there and we just didn't know as we discover new diseases.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Moving on, VAC, or actually schools, we don't have a report this month. To VAC, we have a monthly report. I need a motion to accept the monthly report. Mr. Zenz, Mr. Washington second. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Just for a point of reference, tomorrow we finally worked out the levy. VAC is going to get a 9.1% increase, largest increase in our levy is for the VAC. So stick around for finance tomorrow. We'll get all into that stuff. But, County Administrator's Report. Nita Speckman.
You have the staffing report in front of you. You can see that during the month there were 12 terminations and 12 new hires. So in different departments, it doesn't always happen in the same month that you would have a termination and a rehire. Typically, there might be a lag of 30 to 60 days before that happens. But overall, headcount stayed flat at 524 currently. That's full-time and part-time. Those are not FTEs or full-time equivalents. It is just headcount, total headcount. Questions on that? Okay. Other than the headcount report, during the month, we're spending a lot of time currently on insurance. It is insurance renewal time, so I spent time putting together census lists for our broker so that he could send all our ancillary insurance out for bid. So things like the dental, vision, life insurance, so it includes everyone's dependents and any coverage there so that we can get competitive bids on that and look at a package with our health insurance. So that took some time. Medicare D, Part D notices need to go out for all employees that are over 65 or employees that are enrolled in our insurance whose spouse is over 65. So those have to be out by December or October 1st so that they get a notice that they're eligible to enroll in Medicare Part D, although doing so means they would have to waive insurance with the county. So it's not likely, but it's a requirement of the Medicare law that you notify those people that they are eligible for those Medicare Part D. That's the prescription portion of Medicare. And then the third thing is enrollment classes. While I'm going through all these things, there are some enrollment classes within our insurance coverages that are not I would say not well defined within the policies, so you want to have those cleaned up. So rather than just have a policy that says you have to work over 30 hours in order to be eligible for all benefits, if you have anything that doesn't apply to that, there are certain employees that may work part-time that are eligible under the employment agreements to have insurance coverage. Well, that's got to be well defined in your policy, and it's not. So I've spent really a good deal of time going through those issues, identifying and working to get all those corrected so that our policies are properly stated. And by policies, I mean our insurance policies. So you want to have those well stated so you don't have issues with coverage should an employee have a claim. The other thing is, obviously, we did the policy manual, so those final formatting changes were made, distribution was made to department heads and new employees. There are 4 policies that will circle back to this committee, 3 that are under review in the state's attorney's office. The sexual harassment and whistleblower policies, those go together, drug prevention and background checks. So those will circle back for. The identification badge policy is going to have to be readdressed. It actually says that we have to wear our badges and that there can be some, what do I want to say?
Swift retribution.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, for not wearing it. Well, not all employees, especially those in this building, don't receive badges, and it's never happened. So we want to make sure we get that fixed in the policy. So just some cleanup that's left to do.
And that could have been there for 20 years.
Yes,
I mean, we don't know.
for sure.
You know, it could have been just old dormant.
For sure.
So.
And then we have been undergoing an unemployment audit with the Illinois Department of Employment Security. I spoke to the auditor last night about 5 o'clock, and we're down to just a couple issues. Employees where we've got them, we're not paying unemployment. We consider them to be contractors, and they're kind of, actually I told Andy, it was actually a very good conversation. He wants some things documented on that. So that seems to be wrapping up pretty quickly. So For the next 30 days, we will have to be addressing Diane Owens' replacement. And I did want to make people aware that we will have a reception in the administration department after the next board meeting on October 9th to wish her well as she leaves, ditches us.
You gonna be here that day? Oh, okay.
Oh, well, okay, great. We're
We'll
gonna have a
save
great
something
time
for you.
without you. We'll figure something else out.
Yeah.
And then we'll start to work on open enrollment, because that'll be, open enrollment period will be 12/1 through 12/10, but we'll have to have all the renewal policies in place and costs in place before then, so we'll be working on those types of activities.
She underplays the amount of work she's done this past month. I know it seems like just glossing over the top. Each one of those things were hours and hours of really in-depth thought. So I can tell you, I'm glad you're here. I think the board is too.
Thank you.
Yes. Are you glad to be here?
Depends on the day. No, overall, I will say that, the support of this board, I appreciate. Some of what I do is not easy, and part of my job is telling people what they don't want to hear. And I appreciate the fact that Andy has been supportive even when the news has been brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for that.
Any other questions? Anyone? Thank you.
Mhm.
Moving on, under administrative, got the reappointment of Alice Tinker Parker to the Kankakee County Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. The same for the reappointment of Dr. Andy Wagner to the same committee, and Dina Raymond to the AWAC committee. And the reappointment of Bruce, is it Skofsma? Thank you. Skofsma. I'll take a St. Anne guy who knows the front. Yeah. To the Spring Creek Drainage District. Can I get a motion to combine and approve? Mr. Vickery, Mr. Byrne, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under openings, I have one opening under the Clawson Drainage District, one under the Gar Creek Drainage District, 2 openings in the Mantino number 3 Drainage District, 1 in the Mantino number 9 Drainage District, 1 on the McGilvery Drainage District, 1 on the Minnie Creek Drainage District, 1 on the Momenson Yellowhead Drainage District, 2 openings on the Essex Township Fire Protection District, 1 on the Ethics Commission, 3 openings on the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, and 3 openings on the ICANN Joint Education Committee. So send people our direction if you know anybody. We, at the next board meeting, we do have we'll be announcing for you to vote on another replacement for Pat McConnell's board spot. So we have identified somebody that is accepted. So we'll announce that at that board meeting and have that person come before you for that vote with my recommendation. So I just want to bring that up. That's why it's not been on that list. Finally, any other business? Anyone? Mr. Snipes?
I want to deal with 2 issues and just something to think about. One, hopefully put up on the agenda sometime before we end this year or either next year. As you know, as the last county board member, I spoke about the having at least 4 evening meetings, but not less than 1 or whatever, just to accommodate those individuals who may or may not be able to attend a county board meeting, excuse me, not a member. But I think at least 1 per year. That way it gives you more than enough opportunity to plan it out so that it doesn't be any real cost to the taxpayers. But even if it is a cost that it appears that would be welcome, given that you're at least hearing some of your constituents or community when it comes to the board meeting. So I'm saying at least 4, but not less than 1. Try the 1 to see, in fact, if it's well attended, or at least give them that opportunity. Also, I would like to entertain. I do know that we have 28 board members, but 1 is the chairman. So therefore, he's on a salary, but the other 27, sometimes the meetings are cut and the whole 9 yards, and that's fine if we don't have enough. But I'm thinking that we need to look at the pool of revenue that's for the county board, whatever we have that's just dedicated to the county board, and go with a just an annual equal across the board fee to the just county board members. I do know they don't kind of like that, but when I look at the city, there's at 10. I know we're nowhere near that, but I looked at the 10,000 that they're paid, and I looked at what the mayor paid, and I also looked at that doesn't even equal what 28 members of the county board get. So I think we operate at a substantial savings when you look at we're paid less than 14 when you look at the city of Kankakee. So, but they are all equal across the board at their 10,000 a year. If we consider 5,000 or 3,000, whatever it is, I am saying that that should be just something equal across the board than the fluctuation. Again, that's just a recommendation, something to kind of think about, to find out the pros and cons to each or whatever. But again, it is something that I would ask that the board consider or for the future. Outside of that, I am done.
Thank you. Wow. So under other business, anything else for other business? Any information? Under old business, I did want to bring up one thing, and this was a communication. The board member that brought this up in the full board meeting, Ms. Dunbar, was communicated with. I was on the email regarding the explanation of the hotel occupancy tax. You remember that came up in the full board meeting, and it was explained, I thought, very well by the state's attorney. But I want at least to let the committee know it was supposed to come back here. We don't need to vote on it again. It still is a matter of business for the full board, but it's just an explanation. That part of the hotel motel occupancy tax definitions did not change. If you rent somewhere for 30 days, that's subject to the tax. If you rent for 31 days, it's a month-to-month rental. Does that make sense? So if it's a private house and you rent for 30 days, okay, then you're doing a VRBO or an Airbnb without being on their website. That part hasn't changed. Now there's still, how is people going to find out and all of that kind of thing, but all of this was pretty cut and dried, and I just want to make sure the committee knew that nothing has really changed from before. It was just, what are the definitions of these Airbnbs and other things that are out there, and I don't know if there's anything else that I need to add to that. Graham, is there, there's the public, private, I mean, it's all the same, really. I mean, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Like Chairman Wheeler said, the apartment houses component that Ms. Dunbar raised concerns about isn't changing. The only part that's being added is retreat centers, conference centers, and hunting lodges. That's literally the only change to the ordinance as it reads right now. And that's just echoing the state.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Seroy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a question for Graham. So, as the leaser, could they change their wording to say monthly, and that would supersede them from paying that tax? Or do they have to, does it have to say 30 days or, because as the leaser, if they change their contract to say...
So it's occupancy. So if you have the right to use a space for over 30 days, you're in that exemption, right? That over 30 days exemption from the hotel tax. So if you're on a month-to-month lease, I know there's some concerns about February being 28 days, for example, right? And you've got another month of rent in March, or you were there in January, this wouldn't apply to you anyway, regardless of that term, right?
Okay.
So it's how long you have the right to occupy that space. That's the way to think about it.
Yeah.
Instead of month-to-month or day-to-day or anything like that.
I'm just trying to help out the leasers if they're leasing their property for a month.
If they're
and it's
leasing
a 30-day
a month, then maybe it would fall under this. It's kind of a case by case. It's a bunch of exemptions in the statute, of course. Right. But if it's just a month, maybe. If it's month to month, likely no.
Thank you.
Snipes.
So that also, again, that would apply to our bed and breakfast then. So anything that has a bed and breakfast, they would have to apply these particular fees, because I know they don't currently. So that would be a message that would probably have to get out to them, because of thing. I don't know if you let your kids stay in your upper division and then told them that they was responsible for the bills and whatever, and could that be considered a month-to-month thing, or whatever, as far as the lease, or if they're there, during the school year and moving out. I mean, there's some caveats that's out there, but the main thing I'm looking at is the bed and breakfast.
Does your college-age kid have the right to occupy your upstairs for over 30 days? That's right. Right, a good way to get the kid out of the house. Obviously, this is case by case in certain situations, but overall, you got to look at it from a holistic standpoint, right?
Just rent it for 30 days at a time. You can charge tax. Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you, Graham. I appreciate it. So that'll be back on the full board agenda. Hopefully that explanation is sufficient. So any other new business besides that? All right, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Olthoff beat you to the punch, Mr. Legess. Mr. Seroy seconded out of protest. No, all those in favor? Those opposed?